In response to the shocking news that came out of Arsenal this week that iconic mascot gunnosaurus, otherwise known by his real name Jerry Kai, was to lose his job after 27 years of service, midfielder Mesut Özil, who has not played for the club since March of this year due to his reluctance to take a 12.5% pay cut in reaction to cost-cutting measures due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is the same reason as to why Kai lost his job. Özil tweeted that as long as he remained an Arsenal player, he would cover Kai's salary in full. Yes, today we are talking Mesut Özil, Arsenal, and a breakup from hell. Özil signed for Arsenal on transfer deadline day in the summer of 2013 for a club record fee of £45.5 million. Previously, Arsenal had been very frugal in the transfer market. So frugal, in fact, that up until that point, their record transfer signing was Andrei Arshavin for £12.5 million in January of 2009. That's a jump, of course, of £30 million, and you could... The atmosphere around the club when Özil did sign, when that news broke on Sky Sports, everyone remembers that day as an Arsenal fan. I'm going to say as a football fan, that was an iconic day in Premier League history. Finally, Arsenal put down a financial statement and signed one of the best players in the world in his prime from the world's biggest club, Real Madrid. Real Madrid are the world's biggest club in my opinion. It was fantastic. And for the first 4 seasons, Özil was brilliant. He contributed significantly in terms of goals, assists, and how Arsenal played. And he was particularly successful in the 2015-16 season, where he registered 19 assists in the Premier League campaign. That is second only, certainly at the time, to Thierry Henry's record of 20 assists. And it should have been more had striker Olivier Giroud not gone on a 15-game goalless streak that not only cost Özil the Premier League assist record, but also contributed to Arsenal failing to mount a serious challenge for the title against Leicester City. However, ever since the departure of Arsene Wenger, Özil's form has been inconsistent, and he has been in and out of the team under Unai Emery, under Freddie Ljungberg, who was interim manager, and of course now under Mikel Arteta. Now, under Arsene Wenger, players previously came out. I remember Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain coming out and giving an interview where he said that Özil was Wenger's favourite and that he gave him preferential treatment. Now, why would Arsene Wenger do this? Well, quite simply, he had a flexible managerial style, and he believed that every player had to be treated differently. I completely agree with him here. Not everyone is the same. If you treat everyone the same, you're not going to get the same response from them. And Wenger definitely got the best out of Özil because he was phenomenal for Arsenal while Arsene Wenger was manager, for the most part anyway. Now, Özil has always been marred with the label of lazy by the English media. I would argue that this is actually not the case. They also say that he lacks physicality. While this may be true, Özil has never been a physical player. That's not his game. His game revolves around finding space, picking passes, and dictating the tempo of the game. Saying that criticising Özil for not being physical enough is like criticising Roy Keane or Vinnie Jones for not being deft enough in their touch or their pass. It's just ridiculous. That is not his game. Now, when Unai Emery took over from Arsene Wenger, Mesut Özil was immediately made third choice captain, and he was instilled in the starting 11 in the opening weeks of the season. However, this quickly changed. And if we rewind a few months, to the early stages in 2018, when Özil had signed his bumper £350,000 a week contract, reports kept on coming out of Arsenal that Özil was suffering from a serious back problem. And if you remember at the time, Arsenal were balancing playing the knockout stages of the Europa League with the Premier League, and Özil was prioritised to play only in the Europa League, and he was completely left out of squads for the Premier League, which had never happened before. And the reason behind this was a back problem, and there is reason to believe that Özil was playing through quite a serious pain barrier. Now, when Emery comes in, I don't think that his managerial style suggests that he would treat people differently. He just doesn't seem like that. He never did. He's not an Arsene Wenger style of manager. He's not a great man manager at all. I think that was abundantly clear. And I'm pretty sure that if Özil was coming to him asking for an extra day off here and there, or a little bit more rest time as he might have done under Wenger, that Emery quite flatly rejected that and didn't take kindly to that at all. And that is the reason that he was left out of squads under Emery, not because of a back problem. Now, when Emery is eventually sacked and Freddie Ljungberg takes over as interim manager in December of 2019, against Manchester City, Arsenal lose 3-0 and Özil is substituted in the second half, and in response to this he's heckled by the fans and he takes off his gloves and he kicks them into the crowd, and Ljungberg refuses to pick him again. When Arteta becomes manager, he immediately reinstates him to the starting 11. Arteta and Özil obviously played together for Arsenal at the start of Özil's career. Arteta would have been his captain, and they, in theory, should have had a good relationship. And he was a regular fixture in the early stages of Mikel Arteta's tenure, right up until the coronavirus pandemic hit in the middle of March. Then the relationship between Özil and Arteta and Özil and Arsenal really seems to have soured. It was made known that Arsenal had asked players and senior staff to take 12.5% wage cut to deal with the financial implications of the coronavirus, namely fans not being allowed into stadiums and not being able to give stadium tours, both of which generate significant income for the club. Özil refused, along with two other players. Now, it's very important to note here that Özil was the only Arsenal player whose name came up, whose name was leaked to the press. And Özil then had to defend himself, and his reason was that he wanted to know where that money was going to go, what it was going to do, why exactly he needed to take that pay cut. And when those issues had been clarified to him, then he was probably more than happy to do so. That was his line anyway. It then came to light that Arsenal were proposing 55 redundancies for non-playing staff. That just doesn't show the club in a good light at all, and they were heavily criticised for that, and to be honest, rightly so. They did say that this was part of a long process, and even Rahul Sandhya, who was a director of football at the time, was let go in this streamlining process. However, it's difficult to imagine this happening outside of the coronavirus pandemic. Maybe that was just an excuse to give them a push to actually go through with this. So from this point forward, when football resumed in the summer, Özil wasn't picked. He was not picked at all. At the beginning, again, Arteta blamed a back injury, and then he said Arsenal had played so well in the latter half of the season, particularly winning the FA Cup and then winning the Community Shield against Liverpool, that it was impossible for Özil to work his way back into his plans. Following on from this, we then get to the situation that's just happened. Gunnosaurus, Jerry Kay, loses his job, and Özil immediately says that he is going to pay his salary for as long as he's an Arsenal player. Okay, this is a very generous thing to do. I don't know how much money Jerry Kay is on. There is reports going out that he was on 80k a week. That can't be true. Paying a mascot, I don't care how important he is, £80,000 a week is financially irresponsible, and that doesn't make sense to me. But it's probably likely that he was on a decent six-figure salary. So very generous of Mesut Özil, no matter what he was on, very generous of Mesut Özil to do that. However, why make that public? For me, that's kind of like if I go and give money to charity, then I go and tell everyone I know about it without anyone asking me. I put it all over my social media without anyone asking me about it. I'm like, well, I gave, I don't know how much, €2,000 to Red Cross Ireland. The only reason he's done this is to put Arsenal in the mud. It's a PR game, and it's worked. Arsenal look very bad, and they shouldn't have sacked Jerry Kay. This is ridiculous. They should have continued to pay his salary. They should have made it a priority. Someone who's been at the club for 27 years and who is an icon for Arsenal fans around the world. Everyone wants their photo taken with Gunnosaurus when they go to the Emirates. Certainly Arsenal fans. He's an absolutely iconic figure, iconic mascot in the Premier League, and to just dismiss someone who has given their life to the club like that is shameful. The PR spin aside, I do believe it is PR. Fair play to Mesut Özil for saying he's going to do this. It has to be said, Mesut Özil is very generous with his money. After the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, he gave his entire World Cup winnings, of course Germany won the World Cup, which is about 260,000 euro, so that 23 poor Brazilian children from the favelas could have life-saving surgery. It's not the only time he's done this. After his wedding in 2018, he paid for the surgery of 1,000 children. Not only this, this was his wedding present to himself, to pay for 1,000 children. And he went further than that. He fed 100,000 refugees in refugee camps in Turkey and in Syria with his own money. That is a phenomenal thing to do. And it goes further. He has charitable ventures in London with children's charities. He famously does a lot of work for children, and he doesn't advertise this on his social media. He doesn't put up posts saying, like, promoting this work. It goes on behind the scenes, and although the English media criticise Özil a lot for his lack of physicality and perceived laziness, he does get his fair share of praise for these ventures, and completely rightly so. This is a fantastic thing to do with your money. And you can understand, although I think that probably he would have had enough money anyway to take a 12% pay cut, you can understand why, given so much of his money is invested in humanitarian projects, that he decided to wait. And there's a strong argument that he was right, given the redundancies that we continue to see at the club. It runs further than this. In December of 2019, Mesut Özil put out an Instagram post in which he condemned the Chinese government for their treatment and their internment of over 1 million Uyghur Muslims, who are an ethnic Turkic group who make up a minority of the population in the northwest of China. Since then, it has come to light that there are significantly more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims falsely imprisoned and committed basically to slave labor, and that the Chinese government have been making female Uyghurs forcibly sterile. This is effectively genocide. It's being condemned by a lot of key people in the West, political figures and people in the media. However, not enough. And when Özil put out this post, the first thing Arsenal did was to distance themselves from it. They said that they were apolitical. However, in 2020, earlier on this year, when the Black Lives Matter protests really took off, quite rightly so, in response to the murder of George Floyd under police custody, Arsenal immediately supported this. I completely agree with Arsenal for supporting this, but they should have supported the Uyghur Muslims as well. And I believe that Özil called them out on this. So you have this kind of toing and froing and in the press, and do you know, as far as I'm concerned, this smacks of complete hypocrisy from the club. To fail to condemn one political issue because of your own commercial interests, Arsenal obviously a global brand with business interests in China, and to fail to condemn the disgraceful actions of the Chinese government because of your own commercial interests. But then when you don't have commercial interests in regards to the treatment of the black community in the United States, you're more than welcome. You're more than happy to support that. As far as I'm concerned, Arsenal should be supporting both causes. Both are equally important and they need to be talked about. And brands need to do far more. It's not only Arsenal. You know, I could talk about clothing brands, the likes of Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren and Adidas, who have factories in China, whose clothes are most likely produced by illegally imprisoned Uyghur Muslims. Yet they also support the Black Lives Matter campaigns. It's completely hypocritical to support one political issue over another and to be silent about a political issue because of your commercial interests. It's disgraceful. This has suddenly got very political, but it needed to. And I firmly stand behind Mesut Özil in his criticism of the Chinese government. I completely agree, and I think it's hypocritical of Arsenal to not agree with him and to say that they're apolitical, but then put out political statements in another thing that shows them in a favourable light. I think it's disgraceful from the club. Guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to smash a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and share the content around.